right, we are 4 for 5 on the episodes beginning differently than the game. Welcome to Spot the Difference, Season 1, Episode 5 of The Last of Us. As you can see, it says Kansas City belongs to the people, and they are currently showing the hunters taking control from Fedra, the basically self-proclaimed government of quarantine zones, QZs in the game and show, which is basically the almost safe havens for a lot of people, but under, strict rule of the Federal Disaster Relief Agency. So basically the hunters have taken over, and they're showing that versus in the game, we just assume that this area has been taken over for a while. I think it's cool. It's a good change. A lot of this episode is going to be different than the game, and so I'm just going to blanket statement that the hunters side story is not in the game pretty much at all whatsoever, and I won't need to really call that out. I'll call out anything that has to do with bouncing off of our main characters. The Henry Sam stuff will still have some changes, but the hunters in general were kind of a background, just encounter evil human type people that we dealt with, whereas in this they're not quite as evil. I say that looking at a man with like knives sticking out of him being drugged behind a car, so take that with that context in mind. But nonetheless, the hunters that we saw in the game, they showed a little bit darker side of them that I don't think they show in this. If I'll eat my words if they do in this episode, but when we're first introduced to them, we see them picking off, you saw it right there. Oh, here we go. They pick up the bodies here. And for anyone just joining in who maybe hasn't seen any of these episodes yet, I do have episodes on every episode so far, and we'll be doing the entire series. And this is a VOD that I have of gameplay, a pretty smooth playthrough, easy to jump through and show you differences, comparisons. So you can see they tried to pick off her body and they said like, oh, pair of shoes, they got nothing. Let's go. So they're looking for supplies. They don't care that they just killed a woman to try to take her shoes, and then she didn't even have anything worth taking. Human life is not very valuable to them, that we see very quickly. And we see some more dark stuff in here. Here, there's some pretty gnarly stuff in here. You see that line of dialogue from Ellie? So in here, you can see we're obviously grabbing resources, but if I turn, I don't really turn because I'm racing through this. But in here, there's bodies over here, piles of bodies, and put on the counter. Here we go. Here's a good example as well. That fire she was walking to. So basically they were taking the bodies and using them for stuff. And then other bodies they just burned. So the carelessness, the crassness for not valuing human life at all whatsoever is shown a lot more in the game. I don't think that they show a lot more human side to them in this one. They're still scary because there's a scary human element to them, but it's not as villainy as you say. I say that with this happening, but they show more of their background and they don't have as much of the implied not valuing human life. I don't know. Maybe I'm not wording this well, but there's a difference you can see between the two. This is more, okay, we're taking over. I think maybe just the reasons in general was they were well written so that you don't feel like there is one note villain. So I will say, once again, instead of the characterization of Joel and Ellie, they are focusing on better written side plots and breathing life into those and reconnecting them into the main plot really well. So that's something that the show does much better than the game. And we'll continue to see that as I complain about Joel and Ellie and love parts of this episode otherwise. All right, so second change. I was about to say first change, but we already had a whole rant about how the Hunter story is different. Sam is deaf. I almost said blind because my chat for pretty much our entire last playthrough, which was our platinum run of 1, the entire chat, when we got to Henry and Sam, were like, wait, isn't he blind? And I was like, no. I'm like, are you thinking of the show? And then we realized in the show, he's not even blind. He's deaf. So listen, I don't know if this is some sort of Mandela effect, but in the show, he is, I almost said blind again, deaf. I'm sorry I'm laughing. That's sad, but the context. And I had read somewhere that was originally what they wanted to do in the game. I think probably that would have overcomplicated things for game writing, which makes sense, but this was, I think, the original thought. So this is a change that actually is more canon than the game in some ways, sort of, question mark. But yeah, so we can't hate this change because it's a original thought that was only really, from what I could tell, this could be revisionist history, but was only not done because of the gaming medium. And now they brought it in because we're in the TV medium. So one advantage to TV medium being actually played. Imagine that. Okay, so maybe I spoke a little soon here.
No, we are not really putting them on trial.
Listen to what she says right here. You can see it on the screen.
When you're done, burn the bodies. It's faster.
So, we just saw the burned bodies. Very in line with this show. It's just telling instead of showing. And they did just show the other violent stuff, but it's like they're telling the same story and playing it out differently in this episode. Still canon. And I really like that. That's the kind of stuff that I was hoping for in this whole series. And I think this episode has a lot of that because of this expanded storytelling that still links with the main instead of. You know what I mean? So a good change, I think. By the way, a quick summary for anyone who doesn't have any idea what's going on. Right now, those hunters are looking for Sam and Henry. We are running from the hunters and trying to get away, just as Sam and Henry are. And this seems to be before they found us in the last episode. It didn't really explain that, but at the end of the last episode, we are found by Sam and Henry, and clearly we're not with them right now. So this is a seemingly before situation. And that's where we are timing-wise in both the series and the episode. It is Sam and Henry and Hunter time. Pretty sure this guy that's helping them was the guy that the lady shot in the middle of the last episode. So yeah, I wish they'd kind of been a little bit more clear about the timeline we're on here. It's very, very odd chronological storytelling. But what's neat is that, and what's different, since we're spotting the differences, is that we're able to see Sam and Henry outside of Joel because all of our perspective was really tied to Joel for the most part, or at least our playable character, of which we had two others in the game, Sarah and Ellie. Otherwise, we didn't have any other perspective other than those playable characters. Thus, again, using the TV medium to its full advantage here and showing us some cool details that we couldn't see in the game. Okay, it's actually crazy that we're getting a more powerful moment between Sam and Henry than we pretty much ever do between Joel and Ellie. I know I've said, those sitting parts, they're for the budget and they're kind of boring. However, that's because they do a lot of telling and not showing. Right here, they have to do showing because, well, Sam is deaf. So there's a lot more of, obviously sign language where they're communicating that way. But in this way, he is showing him how he can feel safer. And so they're about to have to leave because the guy that we saw shot in the last episode didn't come back. And he had been allowing him to draw on the walls, or inspired him to, because he'd been drawing like him being a superhero. And so he was kind of acting that out in that way and being creative in that way and feeling more comfortable because of it. And so what Henry does for his brother is to paint a little superhero mask on Sam's face so that when they have to leave, he's going to feel almost excited about it in a way because he's going to feel like a superhero, and it's going to give him a little bit more bravery in the face of what they're about to do and make it almost gamify it in a way. And I'm a big fan of gamifying. If you like it too, buy my book series. This has been our sponsorship segment for my own stuff that you should buy so that I can keep making these. So this is a fun change because we get to see them interact a little bit more in this way. And they did have some cool interactions within the game as well. There's one, most of them are pretty much with bouncing off of, right, Ellie and Joel, because we are Joel in the game. And a lot of them are between Henry and Joel as well. I'm sure we'll see some of that in this episode, but there's a couple soft moments that I don't think I will have captured in this particular playthrough. But when they're going through the neighborhood looking for supplies, we see some sweet moments between Ellie and Sam where, there was one where they had blueberries and we're sharing those and they're having a good time there. But then there's also some where they like play darts. And if you really go through that whole area, that's actually one to get a trophy in, and one where you have to engage with conversation with Ellie 5 times, or at least with the whole group 5 times in order to get the trophy. And so it's clear that bonding with Ellie and the other child, because she really wants friends. It's something that's really important to her, is having friends. She said, do you think there will be anyone my age at some point in the game? And it's just, so it shows a lot of this humanity between these two people that are bouncing off of Joel and Ellie. And so it's cool to get to see it just them in the show. But again, showing this every single second that we show this takes away from seconds that we could have seen it with Ellie and Joel. And the moments with Ellie and Joel don't have cute things like this. And I just don't know why they didn't do more of this. You know, most of what we've seen so far has been angsty, angry, sassy, upset, prodding, trying to put on a show. It hasn't been this like genuine moments between the two. And so I'm glad we get to see that in this show, even if it's not for our main characters. Huge change there. We need more of this. And this is where the show really went wrong for me, is we need more of this with our two main characters. Okay, this is super cool. So we're seeing Joel from Henry's perspective from last episode. So it's pretty neat to see that. That's something that, again, is an advantage to the show, being able to kind of do these weird chronologies. To be fair, they do some stuff kind of like this in the game to some degree in 2 more than 1. But this cool, like, looking at things from different perspectives is something where they're really thriving in the show. And I don't know that I'd like to see more of it, because I'm not sure that there's a place for it, but where they've placed it adds a bit of intrigue. And probably for people who are watching this that have never seen the game or anything, it probably adds an air of mystery and conflict that I think drives the story forward in a cool way. Again, very plot heavy more than characterization, because this doesn't necessarily mean anything for the characters, but it is cool for the viewer. It's that cinematic experience, kind of like having cool gameplay experiences, that it translates in that way. It's that emotion that you get that's outside of characterization and story, and it's just something that kind of speaks to the viewers more than anything. Do you think it somehow saves the money to make the shows this dark? Because I can't see anything. I feel like it's been like this for episodes and I haven't said anything about it. I don't think I've said anything since the first episode, but like, look at this. They're having this conversation at the beginning of meeting Henry and Sam, and look at this versus this. I can't see anything. You can just look at it compared to me, and it's like, what? Do they save money? Like, why are they doing this? It's definitely a difference. I'd rather play the game just so I can freaking see something. Okay, so we've been talking through this series about... Hi, Murph. Jeez. We've been talking through this series about how they like to put clear lines, through lines, threads, things for the viewer to follow, since the gameplay isn't pushing them through as much as in a game, versus here, they need stuff to keep you engaged watching. So what they give you here is an air of conflict between these two, because Henry just admitted to being a collaborator, which Joel goes, I don't work with rats. So it's something that wasn't in the game, but adds some conflict between these two that wasn't really there before. Like, they had conflict, but only because they're both naturally being suspicious of people they don't know, which is fair. But this is like a little deal they get between the two, playing each other's strengths, which isn't necessarily in the game. Both of them could have kind of done it on their own in the game, from what we can tell. We just work together because, you know, enemy of my enemy sort of thing. This is a little bit deeper than that to really keep the watcher engaged. So just listen for a second.
I show the way, you clear the way.
I show the way, you clear the way. So I think it's a good change. I think it adds some clarity, some, what did I call it? Like clearer edges, more crispy edges. It does that. So the show is continuing that trend of TV show storytelling versus game storytelling, having things be a little bit more clean, which in turn makes it a little bit less realistic, because nobody really talks this way with this much pure, clean dialogue and strategy. The game felt a little bit more organic, and things kind of happened more organically, and these nuanced situations with nuanced people just occurred. And so when I say, oh, we kind of work together because enemy of our enemy, it made sense at the time when you watch how they interact with each other and what the potential advantages and disadvantages are. So they talk about the Fireflies.
Putting their stock on the Fireflies these days.
Yeah, maybe there's a reason for that.
So you don't know where they are, and you're just gonna drag him across the country to find them?
I tell you what, how about I worry about my brother, you worry about your girl.
Easy. We're looking for the Fireflies, too.
This is us. There's an abandoned military radio station just outside the city. Any survivors from our group, they're supposed to meet us there tomorrow. You and your girl, you want to join us? It goes down tonight.
So basically in the game, Henry had a plan, a more solid plan than what Joel had, because he was going to find Tommy. But if they can find Fireflies now, sooner, in a different way, he's down. He doesn't have the goal in the game of finding Tommy, right? He has the goal of getting Ellie where she needs to go. The show is different. He's also trying to find Tommy, because while he knows Tommy is out there and would be helpful in this situation, that's not his main goal. He went out with the goal of smuggling guns, getting his weapons, and now it's turned into keeping his promise to Tess. Whereas here, it's not just keeping his promise to Tess, he also wants to find his brother, who he thinks is in trouble because he hasn't communicated the same way that he normally does. So there's a little bit more of a layered situation happening here. So those clear lines need to be drawn a little bit more just because of how they told the story, to, again, keep viewer interest. So this one feels more organic. You know, it's not this necessitated hero's journey type of situation like here. It's just people figuring it out as they go along. And so that's where the game has a huge strength in storytelling, because while these clean edges will keep a viewer who hasn't seen this before engaged, it also loses a lot of the realistic situations that we would have if we were going through this as human beings.
And pointing an unloaded gun at you is the closest I've ever come to being violent.
This is written as a TV show, not as an organic story.
So that's the deal. I show the way, you clear the way.
I think we're learning through this that the strength of clarity is also the weakness of nuance and reality. There's like a spectrum, and they're losing nuance as they go towards clarity. It's that one note that we're seeing. And more throughout a lot of these conversations, I'm seeing that. And I think that's where the show has truly lost me as an obsessed game fanatic, because the beauty of The Last of Us is in these moments where you feel part of it, where you feel that realistic story. Because while Ellie is a bit of a chosen one character, it doesn't play out the same way a lot of chosen one stories do, because of these little tiny details and the organic way the story unfolds. If you haven't played the game over and over, it can actually be difficult to recall the way the story plays out in detail, because things kind of ebb and flow, and it's not as cut and dry as everything in the show. And it's not to say that the show is wrong to do that, because again, clarity leads to, in a TV show, more viewers. And the game has the advantage of keeping you engaged by the gameplay. Because of that, because the fight and the goal is to capture attention, and the game doesn't have to do that legwork as much in some of the storytelling, I'm going to say something that probably nobody has said on any YouTube video about any game or any story or any medium or storytelling in general ever. Gaming, because of its nature to keep attention, has the ability to tell a more organic, well-written story, nuanced story. It has the ability to tell a better story because it doesn't have to focus on keeping the viewer's attention. It can just focus on the story. So all other advantages and disadvantages aside, we are seeing the beauty of what storytelling does in gaming versus these other more popular mediums. And I think that might be part of the reason we are seeing gaming grow as it is. Of course, there are many games that are growing the industry. It's not just, story heavy games like The Last of Us, but there might be something here that we're discovering as we go through these Spot the Differences. And this is why I wanted to do it, because I didn't know where it was going to take us. And I think we just hit a very large point of discovery in this experiment. So thanks for coming with me on it. Let's continue on. We are about, just for a little bit of reference here, we're about 2 hours and 22 minutes into my gameplay in the game. I did about 5 hours. So we're about halfway through my gameplay of The Last of Us 1 versus... we are in episode 5 of 9, so not quite halfway, and we're not even halfway through this episode. So you can see that they're dragging out the beginning quite a bit compared to the way the game unfolds. Because again, I went straight through this game pretty much in 5 hours without stopping. And I didn't die very often. So this is pretty much like as straightforward a playthrough as you can get without being, a speedrunner. And so you can see how much they are heavy loading the front. Not to mention, well, there is the DLC, and I did not play the DLC in my game playthrough. So with that in mind, we might be a little bit more in line. If we removed that episode, technically we would be about halfway. So, you know what? I take it back. We're pretty much on the same pace, which is good. That's good. All right. Continuing on. You may be saying, hey, Mad, that scene was in the light. Again, the slow-mo is because we were experimenting with all sorts of settings. So here's the deal. You may say, oh, okay, well, it's not fair to compare light to dark. Okay, well, here's a dark scene we can actually see versus the dark scene we saw in the show. Okay, so don't come for me and be like, she didn't even do a fair comparison. I can see. It's beautiful. Imagine being able to see. They gave Henry a really cool story. Basically, he has a lot of depth. He thinks of himself as a villain because he turned in a good person in order to help save his brother. His brother was sick. He needed medicine, so he turned in the leader of the resistance to Fedra, which is why he's being hunted by the hunters. That is a foreshadowing for what Joel's going to do. Once again, a great thing for the audience, a great element for foreshadowing, good overall plot storytelling, not necessarily characterization. It's great for Henry, but it's not great for the people whose full character developments we get to see through the series. So once again, now self-contained within the episode, sure, but I don't think that Henry really gets a payoff. He's not somebody who really gets a ton of character development, even though he exists in one whole episode, which we've seen some development with, like in Bill and Frank's episode. That was its own self-contained story, but nonetheless, it doesn't feed into the major characterization throughout the series. It feeds the plot. And this just, once again, shows that the show is more about the plot than the characters and loses a lot of the beauty of the original piece of art. We have some foreshadowing, without giving too many spoilers, but for something in season 2, we have a little foreshadowing here in this conversation, and it again shows what they're doing with the plot, like we just said. But I do love good foreshadowing, so I don't hate it. It's like they're using these side plots to further the themes of the show, and the themes of the show are sometimes in line with the game, quite often in line with the game, even if they're told differently. So I found this pretty interesting. I just want you to see this little snippet real quick, because while she's not a character in the game, she's telling a story of the themes that are done in the game, but the game shows them better, whereas this is telling. So I started out positive on this one, and now I'm a little bit negative. I don't know. The connection is cool. I just wish it wasn't. They do a lot of telling in this show. There's so much dialogue that is telling about things we can't see. And I think that's bothering me a lot because, like, for instance, Game of Thrones, we'll use that as an example again because it's really good TV writing, and on HBO, so it's similar. So it has some similarities, even the casting. The way that they have conversations there is for the characters to bump up against each other and new actions to occur because of that. These aren't changing anything. They're often talking about past experiences and stories in a lot of this dialogue. You'll notice it throughout. And even like how we're going back into flashbacks and things that have already happened that aren't really going to affect our characters in any way. It's like we're being told a story around a campfire. And that is an art that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But there's a saying in writing that if you start out with a prologue or you have too many flashbacks, you're not showing enough in the story. You're telling too much. And that's not a saying, but that's a rule of thumb. And while rules are meant to be broken, the art here seems to have lost a lot of the advantage of TV and just storytelling in general, show versus tell. One of the strengths of showing a theme is allowing the audience to engage with a piece of art in multiple meaningful ways and dissect it for themselves. If you're serving everything on a silver platter and you're not allowing critical thinking and different perceptions to take the front seat, that's really the disadvantage of telling. You're literally telling someone the theme. The whole beauty of art is to show something, to place it there, and to allow others to engage with it differently than what you've given. You're communicating something, but when you're too on the nose, it's not really going to impact people the same way. They're not going to feel in the same way as if they came to a conclusion on their own through critical thinking, because they have a more active, engaging role in that processing. And so that's the beauty of art that's a little bit less telling and showing instead. Because of that, while it has the same themes oftentimes as the game, The Last of Us show is missing the symbolism and the nuance, and it has this heavier hand for conveying things to the audience that doesn't allow the audience to have their own fully developed active role in engaging with the themes and materials, thus removing the potential for more emotions and feeling intertwined with the story, feeling in it yourself. That feeling when you're so immersed in something, you can't put it down and you think about it a lot. They've lost some of that with this. And the reason the game has done so well isn't because on paper it's anything impressive, right? It's a story that anyone could tell on paper, right? The superficial parts of it. But it's the way that they tell this story. It's the way that they let the audience make some thoughts and decisions for themselves. It's the way that they display humanity and allow you to actively engage with it as you are playing the game, which is already another layer of engagement. And it's like this is just being spoon-fed. And I haven't played this scene yet for you, so just...
He told me to forgive.
While it's good...
And what did he get for that?
It's just...
Where is the justice in that?
Too much clarity.
The last time I saw him alive, in jail.
And again, we're looking at that spectrum.
Your brother was a great man. We all loved him.
I've told you why that's bad, but now I'm telling you what we're missing because of it.
But he didn't change anything.
The audience is missing because of it, and what is keeping this show from becoming one of the greats.
You did.
The greatest TV shows of all time, go look at them and tell me if I'm wrong. Go look at them and tell me if they spoon feed you or if they use more of this kind of hands-off approach where they do masterful symbolism, not pushing the horse into the water, but leading, you know? A beautiful story, meaningful for her, meaningful to keep the audience engaged, not meaningful to keep the audience interested in this story past a popcorn watch. It doesn't have the depth that showing it and having the audience engage with it themselves would have. They're Marvel movieing the beauty of the Last of Us game. I just want to show Ellie's manipulation one more time. Again, they're making her out to be...
No, he'll change his mind, trust me. This is how it goes.
Rather than wanting to connect with people.
He's like, no, Ellie, never, ever, ever happen.
Getting what she wants. Manipulative. It's...
And then I'm like, I'm gonna ask you a million more times.
A totally different character, and it doesn't serve the themes of the story at this point in time, so we'll keep an eye on it. What we just saw is, again, not a psychologist, so don't take my advice as like any sort of... She was pushing boundaries, all right? That's what that is. What she just said, I ask a million times, and eventually he says yes. That's called coerced consent. That's a manipulation tactic. To wear someone down until they finally just say, whatever, do it. It's a boundary push. Not a super healthy thing to have, but would be a fine characterization for one of these characters to have and to explore that, because it's not like we need perfect characters to tell a story. I mean, honestly, that would make a very boring story, wouldn't it? Because that's not human. It's not normal. Everybody has faults and weaknesses. So it's not a problem that Ellie has this weakness. The problem is that it's not Ellie's weakness from the game. It's not the same character. She doesn't have the same elements, traits that make Ellie Ellie. This is a totally different character from the one that we know and doesn't serve the themes. We're going to keep an eye on it and see where it leads. All right, so there haven't been zombies in this at all. pretty much. It's like, is this even a zombie show? But we finally have one here, and it's one that I mentioned a few episodes back as, hey, in Billstown in episode 3, because it was the Bill and Frank story, and there was really no zombies in that either. It was like a little love story randomly in the middle. Again, beautiful, but not exactly Last of Us. Theme-wise, sure, but not zombie-wise. Look at all these that we're seeing in the high school, by the way. They're just constant in the game. And again, budget reasons, but still, like, they're lacking hard. But in the game... All right. I thought it was throwing a molly. Once again, sorry for the bottle throw. It wasn't on fire. It should have been. Okay. But this is the big bloater boy. Look at him. He actually looks not as scary when you've done this enough times, but you can see him bursting through the door already.
Come on. Shit. There's more on the way.
It's not a normal option.
Barricade.
That don't sound good.
Tell Shelby you're not talking to her. There he is. Look at him. All right. So that bloater never showed up in the show. We haven't even seen a zombie in like 3 episodes, it feels like. It's like, is this even a zombie show? But finally, check this out. Well, the little slow-mo was weird. That was a weird editing choice. All right, there he is. So, Hims is the bloater, and this whole scene is a ton of zombies running around, and the people and the zombies are fighting, which is something we see a lot more in 2, where we can kind of pit our enemies and the zombies against each other. We don't see it as much in 1, but they brought it into the show because I guess, again, probably budget reasons, they don't do one-off zombies. They do, like, very often. They do a lot of these big... Well, not even a lot. They do like this one. They do very rare scenes of just a lot of zombies at once. And it just feels like we're Last of Us-ing on a budget. I don't know. I don't know how much it costs to make this quality happen, but it seems like they could have done a little bit more. I don't know. Would you... I've asked it before in another episode, but this just reminded me heavily of how few zombies we've really seen in this. Would you prefer lower quality zombies to have more of them, or do you like that there's only like one big cinematic thing here and most of the rest of it there's like no zombies? In the game, these are not the same constraints. We have zombies literally every 3 seconds. I say that and then I'm clicking and there's no zombies. But they're like all right through here. Like while we're pushing the truck, there's zombies. Hold on. See, there you go. Lots of zombies. Okay, so all through the game. By the way, this whole scene here with the hunters is equivalent to a scene in the game, except that that one happens in the daytime. Imagine having light. Oh my gosh. I don't know if this is just so that they can have like the fire shining differently to give it like an eerie thing, or because zombies in the daytime would be harder to make happen realistically. I don't know, but have we seen any daytime zombies? Not very many. I think maybe when they killed Tess, it was kind of lighter. Even then it was kind of shady. So watch this and I'll show you the equivalent. There you go. Yeah, we don't see very many. Anyway, so this exact scene is pretty much similar to what we have right here. Oh, I forgot I'm in slow motion. So see how we have the tank, we're getting these people, right? Sorry, I'm in slow-mo. All right, so there's Henry, Sam, and Ellie, okay? Henry, Sam, Ellie. We're celebrating. All right, we did it. Oh, wait, this is like just 2 zombies at the end. Oh, yeah. Okay, so after that, here's the zombie horde running at us. So this is where it's kind of similar, except the zombies happened after the people in the game. It was a little separate. Like I said, 2 does a lot more where you can play them against each other. So, and this is, again, only 3 hours, not even 3 hours into the game. Whereas in the show, we're in the middle of episode 5. So, you know, almost 5 hours. They've expanded a lot, as you can see. And this is like with gameplay too. You know what I mean? So a lot of story that's happened in here. That just shows you how much they expanded stuff. But yeah, this is the equivalent. And basically it's this whole hunter story coming to a climax with the exploder and the zombies all coming out from underground because they crashed into something. And they had foreshadowed this earlier in the episode where Henry had said, oh, they chased them all underground. So this all makes sense within the framing that they've put in the show, but has nothing to do with this, really. I don't know that we really particularly had a reason for the zombies coming out of there. They probably crashed into something over here, too. They combine a lot of elements into one, even though they've expanded the story so much. So it's interesting where they chose to focus. It's like they want to keep doing really slow parts to build up to these moments that can be like the thing you talk about in the episode. It almost feels like they're pandering to 2025. I guess this was more 2023, but you know what I mean? It's like they're not, half the time it doesn't feel like they're writing it for the story. They're writing it for the attention. And I think we're losing art because of it. I do. I think we're seeing how much loss of the beauty of some of these organic things in art and storytelling and gaming as an art. We're losing that in a lot of TV because instead of focusing on the beauty in the art, they're focusing on how to make people talk about a moment in the show. And I think that that's to storytelling's detriment, to art's detriment. On a much more positive note, because I don't think I've said really anything positive this entire episode, this moment right here almost makes everything worth it. This is a little baby clicker. I don't think we ever saw a child zombie in the game that I can think of other than Sam, which is about to happen. Like, we didn't see a clicker. We didn't see a runner, like a child runner. I wonder why that is. It could just be like a ratings thing, like in terms of making the game more wholesome. Yeah, as far as I can remember, they don't have a single child zombie in the game. Yeah, so this was a surprise, a fun little surprise. That's one. Is this like the third thing? I think this might be the third thing that we would take from the show and put in the game that I like. If I could choose anything to bring, this would be 3. The show's doing okay. I got it's could be worse. Here's a little Easter egg and a big change. They've mentioned the comics a couple times in this episode. The episode's called Endure and Survive, and that's the comic book saying, and it's a collectible in the game. So, and even in the second game, the cards, I think, are related. The trading cards might be related to it. I'll find out tomorrow when I start my platinum run. But nonetheless, you see Ellie reading the comic book to Sam as a moment of bonding, which in the game, I like their moment better. It's to a similar effect, but this one is cute for gamification because she gives him that. That is a little action figure, and it is something that you see throughout the series. I believe you see it again in game 2, if I'm not mistaken, on her shelf. But what's even cooler is, well, maybe not cooler, but what's cool about this in the game, because in a show, they might show you a detail and you might be paying some attention and you know, they usually call attention to details, but in a game, you could so easily miss this. Watch. You see her picking it up? That's her picking up the action figure. She tries to do it when we're not looking and picks it up for him because Henry wouldn't let him pick it up. And it's just this very special moment. And it shows the nuanced characters because even though Henry loves his brother, he has to be kind of hard about certain things where he's like, we don't take anything that we don't need because they're trying to survive. But then it doesn't ever say this, but you can take what that means for you in the game. And they leave that very open to interpretation about, you know, we take the toy for him and then Sam almost immediately dies upon receiving it. And we think, wow, he could have had that. Well, I think personally, you might take something different from it. I think, wow, he could have had that the whole time. But if he kept taking stuff like that, maybe that is what gets him killed. But in this case, you know, it's like he wants these little tiny moments of beauty. He wants to appreciate things. And these things could, you know, hurt him, could be to his demise, depending on what it is and, you know, how heavy it is in a moment. It's not a bad rule for them to have, but their lives were cut so short. Wouldn't it have been nice to appreciate it in the moment? And that's what I take from that. But the game doesn't tell you that, right? It just shows you her giving him that toy and then he immediately dies after. So you can take from that what importance you put on it. It's just one of those things that isn't spelled out for you like it is here. And this scene is going to be spelled out, and it's about to happen very differently from the game as well. Okay, so in the game, they don't make this moment as obvious. And I think they did that in the show because they want to change how we see Ellie for the end. And they create these points of interest for conflict at the end because they've set up the fact in the show from the first episode and the second episode in particular, the flashbacks, to them saying there is no cure, there's no possibility of a vaccine. And this is scientists who would have had everything at their disposal and all the time in the world to study these things and been experts of these things. And yet we have people who think that they can maybe make a vaccine at the end of this story, and they don't have all of that at their disposal. So they paint it as a very unlikely potential for even Ellie, as someone immune, to be able to make a vaccine from. So that's more so in the show than the game. In the game, there's a little bit more air of mystery to whether it would work. In the show, they're pointing towards, hey, this has very, very little likelihood of working. And in the show, to combat that, they want to show Ellie's dedication to the cause, and so they paint that in a much more black and white manner than they do in the game, where there's a lot more hope. They all have a little bit of hope towards it. Both her and Joel's dialogue towards the end shows their hopeful nature of this working, and we'll get there. But in the show, instead of seeming more hopeful, it's very dire, but they show Ellie's want to be a hero. They're trying to make her want to self-sacrifice. Whereas in the game, it was a little bit more vague. Again, they're painting a much more clear picture, but because of that clarity, there's going to be a lot less that the audience can kind of decide for themselves by the end. So just look at this for a second. So Sam is actually showing her that he's bit. Whereas in the game, they have a similar conversation about what happens, but he waits for her to leave the room before the audience sees that there's a bite. See, she leaves. And that's when he looks, which doesn't give her the opportunity to react to it until he's already turned. And that's obviously going to be a different reaction than what she has here, which is to try to save him. So she shows him her bite, and then she tries to see if she can give him her blood, basically, which as a kid isn't a terrible idea. It's a fair reaction. I actually really liked this moment when I first saw it in the show, but it does paint a different picture of Ellie, where it shows this self-sacrificing nature that the game doesn't have. Do I hate it? No. Do I think it fits with the themes necessarily and the vague up in the air that was in the game, because you have these two presences making, Joel and Marlene making decisions for her. And here it's setting up that she would be more or less on Marlene's side. Now, helping him in this way with a little bit of pain versus giving your entire life is a completely different scenario. Nonetheless, they're setting it up for her being kind of more on Marlene's side than Joel's here, which paints a good picture for two. It's not anti-canon, but it is giving a different weight to all of the decisions without allowing the audience to kind of decide for themselves. So watch this for a moment. So she presses her blood against his ankle. And honestly, when I first saw this, I was like, wait, are they going to try to change canon in the show? And I wasn't mad at it if they kept him alive. So they also probably did this to mess with the gamers. And I also do respect that. I think there should be little moments of that in any adaptation where they twist something just enough that you wonder if they're going to change something, even when they don't. And generally you shouldn't, or, you know, the original art consumer is going to be upset with too many changes. As we can see, it's why I'm literally doing this. So I think this was a cool one where they circumvented our expectations a little bit and then circumvented them again to make us happy. It's a smart writing decision, but it also has the bittersweet result of making audience perspectives for them a little bit more. And honestly, if they did all of that just to lead to this moment in order to create emotion here with the audience based on these characters, they've built up Sam's character really, really well in this. And this moment right here is another that I think would be really cool to have in the game. So we have 4. They've done 2 right beside each other. I don't know how they would do that without having this full moment. So just take that with kind of a grain of salt. But the emotions that you get from watching this couple of seconds. His little face, stay awake with me. God, dude. Whew. That's like emotion straight into the veins, dude. God. So they did good with that. That's number 4 that I would take to the game. Good writing right there. It almost makes up for everything else I just said about this moment. I'm going to be honest, I don't know that game Ellie would have been this irresponsible to fall asleep, though. I feel like when she started to fall asleep, she would maybe go get Joel. This is like super naive and irresponsible, and not in the same ways that Ellie was in the game. She was usually pretty intelligent about things, and they just showed her being very perceptive, so it's weird that they would allow her to just fall asleep in this moment, but it's probably just the easiest way to write it. Seems like an easy way out that isn't necessarily super founded in her actual character here. So this scene of Sam turning and coming after Ellie and Henry taking care of things, and yeah, this really sad scene pretty much plays out almost exactly the same as the game, but I noticed a key difference right before it in that Henry and Joel didn't have a conversation. And again, I feel like they didn't have that conversation about the motorcycles and that happy moment with them and Ellie together. And then Ellie goes into the room with Sam. And it just feels like, once again, for the plot, we are losing key moments for Ellie and Joel's characterization. We learn very little about Joel in the show like we learn about him in the game. We have moments, for instance, one of my favorites in the game would be in this episode, or the one right before it, actually. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time looking for this, but they're outside and there's a poster. It's after Billstown somewhere, and it's of a Dawn of the Wolf, which is a movie that seems like Twilight. Yeah, it's right around here somewhere, right when they first meet the hunters. We see that poster in Sarah's bedroom, and then we see it twice after in the game, at least twice that I've noticed. And we can have a conversation with Ellie about it in the game. And it's like these little sweet moments that we get to know Joel, because he's like, yeah, I saw it. And she's like, with who? And he goes, all right, let's go. And so it's like this moment where he starts to kind of open up a little bit, and you get these, like, that's where they share their past experiences in a way where there's curiosity, in a way where we get to really know the characters more, versus a lot of the stuff we were seeing Ellie ask him gave us just more lore. It was like lore dump, world building dump. And as much as that's fascinating as a player of the game who can't get enough lore, it doesn't build up their relationship enough in the show for me to care at the end. And we're seeing this once again in this episode over and over again. But yeah, this scene plays out almost exactly the same. There probably won't be much more for us to talk about as we go into fall. We're about to hit fall. Oh, and I forgot. Sorry, we're like in the middle of like one of the saddest scenes of the game, and I'm over here in show, and I'm over here like talking about something kind of unrelated. But right before this, they were also talking about like motorcycles, and Henry was talking about how he wants to feel the wind in his hair, and he's like, oh, it's not any old motorcycle. Why am I telling you when I can show you? It's a sweet, yeah, there we go. Do you see that? It's a sweet moment. Yeah, Ellie, it's not any old motorcycle. Vroom, 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 vroom. See right there? They're having this sweet moment, and it just shows a lot more about them. And this like has this peaceful, lighthearted moment that we really didn't have here, you know? And I think that's what they were trying to do with the 2 seconds of comic book reading. But how is that at all equivalent when you're seeing like these cute little facial expressions? Look at that happy Joel. Look at that happy Henry. And then she laughs, and they're all laughing, and we don't have that. And I feel like this show in particular doesn't have as many nice uplifting moments to make it like a bearable watch. It's a pretty just heavy watch. And the game, the only reason I can play it over and over is because it has these organic moments of happiness that we would have in the face of any obstacles, in the face of any darkness. You have these moments to appreciate, and that's part of the beauty of the art of The Last of Us. And it's missing this so significantly. There's very, very few lighthearted moments in the show, and it just brings the whole thing down a little bit. I'm mad curious. This has been Spot the Difference, Season 1, Episode 5 of The Last of Us. If you want to see more, click on the next video, and make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.